Today I want to show you some techniques and ways how to achieve that sonder/Brent faiyaz type of sound. I'm taking here mostly inspiration from his main producer D-Pad. D-Pad and Atu are both producers and part of Sonder. And together with Brent, they created their specific sound of dark, ambient R&B. I went over to D-Pad's Instagram to take some inspiration from his latest work. I immediately noticed that he likes to use guitars a lot, so I started recording a simple chord progression on my guitar. But instead of just strumming the chords, I've decided to come up with a simple pattern, and it sounds like this. On my guitar, I used some EQs to get rid of some unwanted frequencies and cut out some of the low end. I also did some compression to control the dynamics. After that, I run it through some tape emulation by UAD. And I also added a reverb effect to add some ambience. The next thing I added was a bass. For this, I recorded a simple bass line on my bass guitar. And if you're not the greatest bass player like me, I would highly suggest to Google some pentatonic scales and just improvise until you find the right bass pattern. That's how I did it. The bass also has some simple EQ, compression, and a little bit of saturation on it. I added some percussions to give it a little bit more bounce. Something underrated but still very important for those type of beats are texture sounds. You definitely need to add some texture sounds here and there to give it some life. I added some rain noise and a crow. This kind of makes it sound nostalgic, sad, and dark. Then I added some synth phrases to fill out the empty parts, or to have some transitions between the different parts. But keep it simple. It shouldn't distract from the main instrument or the main melody. And of course you can't have a R&B Sonder type beat without vocals. For this I grabbed some vocals from the splice pack from Jessica Domingo. She's a great singer and her splice packs are perfectly for those type of beats. As far as for the processing of the vocals, I used an EQ to create this telephone effect. I added some compression to control the dynamics, and the secret sauce is definitely adding a flanger and a phaser on it, to get that vintage warp sound. And of course adding a reverb for the ambience again. That's it for the intro, let's get to the main parts. It's very important to keep some elements throughout the beat. For example, I've kept some synths and some percussion sounds. However, I still switched everything else up. For example, the guitar is now reversed and has this lo-fi sound. I achieved that by adding a bunch of effects on it. And basically all of them are just trying to make it sound more lo-fi, more gritty. And instead of the main guitar, I've added a new synth playing the exact same chord progression. I also added a different bass sound because I felt like it was lacking of some bounce. As for the drums, I've tried to keep them simple but still bouncy. One way of achieving this is by not having the drums hit perfectly on the grid. Something else that I've noticed in those beats are the different snares that are used. So I also tried to use different snares and create a more complex rhythm instead of just hitting on every third beat. I also added a reverb on the main snare to make it sound bigger and getting more ambience again. It's also very important to add here and there some breakdowns or beat switches, since this is very common in Sonder type beats. D-Pad said that they often have beat switches and breakdowns because they are two producers.
A lot of Sonder songs have like certain outros or like the song switches or the beat switches. And the reason that's like a thing is because Sonder's two producers. So I'll maybe send Atu something and he'll hear something and flip that, or I'll hear something that Atu makes and I'll flip that. So that's why like there's a lot of just instrumental outros and beat switches, I guess.
So I added a little breakdown and added some piano chords. For the process of the piano, I used the Neve preamp to get some more saturation, some EQ and compression, and also run it through some tape emulation for that vintage vibe. I also sped up the vocals and pitched it 1 octave higher. And for the last part, I also added a shaker to give it a faster bounce. This method is also very often used in D-pads or sonder type beats. So instead of having some 16 hi-hats, just try to use a shaker instead. I don't know what it is, but it kinda adds a different feeling to the beat. And basically that's the whole beat. Of course I added here and there some transition effects like some risers or some short vocal phrases from myself. So I'm gonna play you now the final result with some footage that I recorded and edited myself to really give it that final touch and having some sonder vibes. And if you enjoyed this video, I would be so thankful if you leave a subscribe and also comment which type of beat should I do next. Okay, let's go.